Okay, so now guys, for the main event. This is going to be amazing. When we think about Five Stones and our committee, what do we do in terms of a task force? How do we choose topics? And one of the ones that we thought about was buyers. And so I'm so pleased today that we're going to have a panel discussion that will be led by our dear illustrious Lance Cashion, who is actually part of our Five Stone Steering Committee, as well as other Five Stone Steering Committee partner members, and Lance will introduce them. So thank you guys so much. And guys, please pay attention because I think this is going to be information that you'll find very crucial.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you guys for being here. We got a full house. This is awesome. And I'd like to welcome our panel. For the sake of time, what I'm going to do is I'll have some questions. If we have time at the end, we'll have a Q&A so our online guests can ask questions as well via Zoom. But we'll try to get to some of your questions as well. So what I'd like to do is just go down the panel, have each of you introduce yourselves, and then answer the question, why is demand reduction important? So Ty, I'll start with you, sir.
All right, thanks, Lance. My name is Ty Bowden. I'm the Associate Director at the Net. I've been doing demand reduction stuff here in Fort Worth and across the state of Texas since 2015. And so first, let me say something that we as a task force and a steering committee think is very important when we have these discussions, especially in a short panel. It's hard to have a real nuanced conversation sometimes. And so you're going to hear us talk a lot about what happens to buyers, what we believe about buyers, how we can keep them from buying in the future. But everything that we say today is we just want to acknowledge that we believe that buyers are doing real harm to real people. We believe that they're responsible for their actions and they need to be held accountable. So we're going to talk about some ways that we believe are best to do that. But everything that we say here does not excuse any of them. It doesn't let them off the hook for their behavior. So first, just want to be clear about that. That's something we do feel is important as a steering committee. And why I believe demand is so important is that, simply put, if you have no buyers, you have no business. And so without the men who prop up this industry, we wouldn't have women and children being victimized as often as they are. And then, at least from a civilian side, we know we're going to hear from law enforcement and prosecution. But why the Net engages in this is that we will not, we've heard Sheriff Wayborn say over and over again, we can't arrest our way out of this problem. So there has to be a civilian component that's getting upstream that's affecting men before they engage in this work.
Thank you. Lindy.
Lindy Borchardt, Human Trafficking Prosecutor for the Tarrant County Criminal District Attorney's Office. And I just agree with what Ty had said. Unless we address the demand for prostitution, we will never end human trafficking. And it's exciting what we're doing as a county to address that demand. And I appreciate being here today.
Thank you. Commander Turner.
My name is Kevin Turner. I'm a commander with the Tarrant County Sheriff's Office. I serve as the task force coordinator for the Tarrant County Human Trafficking Task Force. And I like to echo what Ty and Lindy has said. And I think also what we're focusing our efforts on with Ty's help is some of the underlying reasons why these individuals are seeking out commercial sex. We understand that is a huge nexus of what we're dealing with when it deals with demand. Because oftentimes what we're seeing when we're doing interviews, and Ty can echo some of this as well, is that there's often a link to pornography. Oftentimes they're addicted to pornography, and sometimes that pornography does not meet their needs anymore, so they're acting out on what they're observing. So I think from the demand side of things, it's not only about addressing those issues that Ty mentioned, but it's also talking about the underlying issues that is driving demand.
Right. So let's talk about who these buyers are, and touch briefly on the background and the sort of the demographics, the motivations that each of you observe with buyers. And Ty, do you want to start out?
Sure. So at the Net, we do direct buyer engagement, both supporting law enforcement operations, but we also do online civilian to civilian engagements. And so since 2015, we've done over 15,000 of those engagements online. And the one thing that is true about all buyers is that they come from everywhere. There's no common demographic. The first call we ever took here in Fort Worth was a 15-year-old kid. I've talked to men in their 80s who are doing this. And we know from both anecdotal stories and the best research that we have on buyers that there's not really anything that correlates them via age, race, socioeconomic status, because we're not dealing with one subset of the population. we're dealing with men. I would say, so the one thing that combines in all those engagements, I've never had a woman call us. We've never had a woman who's trying to do this. It's literally 100% men in our experience. And so the one common denominator there is there's something broken in these men, and they're seeking to fill that and remedy that through obviously a really harmful and exploitative and false intimacy. So in our experience, that is the through line, is that there's something broken inside of them. And this is the way that they're trying to fix that. But other than that, there's no common denominator.
Commander Turner or Lindy, anything to add?
Well, it's interesting on my perspective because they come into court with their attorneys and they're oftentimes there with their wives, their girlfriends. 2 weeks ago, I had a defense attorney showing me pictures of the defendant playing with his grandchildren. And so they present, this family, and I always ask the defense attorney, help me understand this, because when he's trying to pay for sex, he's not thinking about his wife, that I can tell. When he's trying to pay for sex, he's not thinking about that precious 3-year-old grandson. So help me understand really where that disconnect is. I'm still working on that.
Yeah.
I'm struggling with that one.
And I'll add to what Ty said is like, I think there's a lot of misunderstanding of who the buyers are. I mean, a lot of people think they're undereducated, blue collar workers, and that's not the case. We've had, business leaders, we've had attorneys, we've had law enforcement, we've had firefighters, we've had medical professions, we've had them from all walks of life. And their educational levels is from a GED to a master's degree. So, I mean, there is no way to put a particular type on a buyer because they are just stressed the entire game.
And I mentioned some of the things that they're dealing with internally. And again, what research tells us a lot is they have normalized beliefs about women in prostitution who they want to be there. And this is just a guys will be guys mentality. And so those are some of the things that do tie buyers together, is those beliefs. And we already mentioned it a little bit, but I've never sat across from a buyer in a hotel room and asked him, do you watch pornography? And him say no. I'm sure they exist, but at least in our experience, in those conversations that I've had, 100% of them are dealing with some sort of pornography addiction.
Right. So let's talk about some of the initial interaction with buyers, and from your perspective, because obviously the two of you are in these interactions with these buyers. What does that look like, and what is it? Just paint a picture for us.
In the more general terms, so I can't divulge all of our secrets. No,
Right.
So it's like typically an operation when we do demand reduction initiatives is that we will post what is deemed decoy ads on known escort service sites. And at that point, we'll have investigators manning basically phones and waiting for communication from buyers. And it is amazing that as soon as we post those ads, probably within 5 to 10 minutes, we are starting to get any notification from buyers asking like, are you available? Where are you at? What are your rates and things of that nature? So it's amazing how fast and furious it starts the entire process and stays that way until we end. But during that course of communication, once they agree to meet with us and to purchase sex, then we will generally give them a location to meet, whether that be a hotel, an apartment, a house, a park. And then once they arrive, we have what's a contact team or an arrest team. We'll detain them at that point. We'll confirm that they're actually the ones that we've been communicating with, and then we will subsequently place them in custody for solicitation of prostitution. Which I will say, for y'all that are unaware, but I think most of us are, that the state of Texas is the first state in the country to make a first-time offense for purchasing sex a felony offense. And that has been an amazing game changer for us, because prior to that, they were low-level misdemeanor offenses, and thus, if they did, and most of them accepted some type of plea deal, there wasn't enough time to put them into a program that maybe addressed really what the underlying issue was. With it now being a state jail felony, that gives us more leeway to actually push these individuals or make these individuals engage in these courses that will really address the reason why they were there, and hopefully that will deter them from buying in the future.
I'm gonna pause real quick because of that, what he just mentioned, part of Five Stones is legislative advocacy. So know that part of that being passed is because of the efforts of this community, and communities like us around the state, putting pressure on politicians to pass good bills. So I think that's worthy of praise, and thank you, Ty. Anything to add?
Yeah, so once, when we're doing in-person support, once they're arrested, one of the detectives will just say, hey, there's a group that wants to talk to you. And so, most of these men don't know that it's a felony, because they're not thinking, if this is consensual adult prostitution, why would this be a felony? So they're kind of shell shocked by that. They thought we're doing this during the middle of the day. They thought they were going back to work after, this date. And so their whole life is kind of upended. So when we engage with the buyer, we have two priorities. First is education, on the reality of what the industry that he's propping up. So I told you, most of them believe that what they're doing is the old victimless crime, the oldest profession in the world trope. They believe that. So we want to counteract that with the truth of the reality of what the majority of these victims are experiencing. And then also from the research that we have and from survivors. This is, I think, a key point, have said that the only way to keep these men from coming back is to restore whatever is broken inside of them. And so, in these situations, they're sitting in handcuffs. They're going through the criminal justice system. They're going to be held accountable for their actions. And so how can we take advantage of that, of the fact that they're now being charged with the felony, to have them actually work on those things that are leading them to that hotel room? And so we have an initial conversation with them. As you can imagine, they're not, a little bit in a state of shock, and so not totally processing. So we just try to provide them with an opportunity to get in contact with me and our team, once they bond out or whatever. And then we've been working with community supervision. I saw Judge Wynn come in. She's been sending some of her veterans to us to go through an online course that we just call our education and restoration course. And so it has Commander Turner's in there. We have some other anti-trafficking folks from around the state. We have a survivor. We have a clinical sex addiction therapist that helps these guys take responsibility for their actions. But instead of just, a defensive driving course where they're checking a box, we really have some good reflection questions that are helping them understand how they've gotten here in the first place, and why being married, being a father, most of these men are coming in a relationship. How in the midst of this do they get to this place where they're willing to objectify and purchase another human being? And so then trying to connect them with resources like volunteers who can check up on them, get them connected to counseling, Sex Addicts Anonymous group, faith-based group, whatever it is. And so that's what we're working on. And it took it becoming a felony, because we've had this course for a while, and when you ask someone to voluntarily sign up for that, it doesn't go super well, as you might imagine. We had a couple of guys who really did want to make changes, but now with this kind of stick of, hey, you're gonna go to jail or face at least a couple years of probation, we're starting to see these men take this seriously. And I get to read all their survey responses, and you have a couple of guys will come through, do the course, and they treat it like defensive driving. They type 1, 2, 3 in the required, boxes and move on. But for most of them, they are thinking critically about what's gotten them there. And we ask them to watch it with a partner in their life. And so we'll have men that will do the course with their wives, with their girlfriends. And they'll talk about how bringing these issues to light is starting to, lead to some restoration and reconciliation in those relationships. And so again, while that's what we're moving towards, so that they don't, go through probation, they don't get in trouble, and then they're back doing this again 2 years from now. We want them to think critically, restore what's broken in their lives, while also being held accountable for their actions of exploiting other people.
Lindy, would you like to add anything? You're a little bit further downstream from that initial interaction, but would you have anything to add on your initial interaction with these buyers?
I think that there's tremendous value of being a team in this. I'll tell you, I struggle with some of these concepts. I mean, don't pay for sex. I mean, that seems like it's very simple life decision there. And so, but I'm glad I have Ty, to to tell me that there's more to it. And I do believe that unless we focus on rehabilitation, we will never stop the demand side of it. So I do believe in the programs. It's hard for me to understand on some level, but I trust Ty, and I do believe that we have to stop the demand in order to end human trafficking.
And just on that note, we're not for everyone, right? We are for, again, research tells us that about 25% of men drive like 75% of the sex market. Those guys don't need me. They probably need jail time, right? That 75% of guys who are doing this infrequently, but we would refer to as an infrequent buyer. Those are the guys that we have a chance to get upstream and help them change behavior on their own. So not everyone that goes to see them comes to see me, because there are guys who need higher intervention for sure.
And talking about a high frequency buyer, just to lay that in some context, we ran a month-long operation when the law changed, and we arrested an individual at the very beginning of September, and we arrested him again at the end of September. So, I mean, and that's what we're talking when Tom mentioned these high frequency buyers. We are starting to see these individuals, but what we're seeing though is they've already been charged once and convicted once. So now we can start enhancing the penalties against them as they continue to offend. So that's also a great thing for us with being so strong as far as the demand side of things, really start to lay that groundwork to enhance these penalties against these frequent buyers. So.
I think what I'd like to go is, now we've talked about that initial contact, and we've actually moved into my next question, which is, what does the ongoing interaction with the buyers go? You guys have touched on, but let's, again, that pathway, what does restoration look like? What does the education piece look like? And then also punishment, rehabilitation, Lindy. So let's talk about restoration, like,
Yeah.
you know, or this ongoing.
Yeah, so again, we would believe that those normalized beliefs, networking with other buyers and pornography consumption are the kind of common factors that lead people to buy sex. And so we want to address those issues. And so through the education piece, helping them, again, understand the reality of what they're participating in, talking about pornography and how harmful it is, and how, like Commander Turner said, sometimes it's literally like what they are seeing on a screen no longer satisfies. And so while they might have a wife or a girlfriend, they're asking for, you know, deviant, violent sex acts. And so you can't do that in the context of a relationship. And so you're having to pay someone, because then you purchase consent at that point. And so helping them understand the reality of pornography, and then getting them connected to those resources. So whether that's, you know, I'm not gonna be the counselor for every buyer that comes through my course. So getting them connected to a clinical sex addiction therapist, getting them in a faith-based group, getting them going to couples therapy. So, you know, the women who stick around and are willing to work through these issues with these men, I think, are probably the bravest people in all of this. And I think the vast majority of guys, I'm sitting in there in a La Quinta bathroom talking to them, the first thing they say is, man, my wife is going to leave me. And, you know, maybe she will, but we try to help them at least be honest, engage in transparency, and move towards reconciliation in that. And so we provide the opportunity for a volunteer to walk with them during that time. Again, not a ton of them take us up on that. Most of them are just kind of trying to get through this as fast as possible, but at least providing them with that information. We talk a lot about increasing that cognitive dissonance the next time they might want to pick up that phone. They know the reality of what someone is experiencing on the other end of that transaction, and they've started to maybe have some of that reflection about, this is why I'm doing this. You know, maybe they get no billed, or maybe they complete probation or something like that. At least the next time they pick up that phone, they have to, you know, maybe lie to themselves a little bit more, or fight through those things that they now know to be true about what they're participating in before they can do it again.
Lindy.
Yeah, so in the criminal justice system, you have three concepts. You have punishment, rehabilitation, and deterrence. And that's what all jurors have to balance when it comes to deciding punishment for all criminals. Interestingly, when this law changed, the legislature also passed a law to where county commissioners and counties could establish a prostitution prevention program. And it's a very structured type of probation program that requires a rehabilitation piece, such as Ty's program. It's capped at a certain level, and then if they successfully complete it, then there's an opportunity for that to be off their record. That is a program that we'll begin to look into. The DA or the prosecutor has to agree for that defendant to be a part of that program. And so that is what we'll be looking into. These sting operations are very successful. There are hundreds, like 374 cases, yearly that's being turned into the DA's office. So looking into that type of program with the right people, it'll be interesting to see if that's where we, the direction we go in, because that was a part of the legislation that passed and increased it to a state jail felony.
Right. Before we go to Q&A, any other, because we're just scratching the surface here with one meeting with one panel. So this is a much deeper issue, touches, pornography, driven by pornography. I had a good friend at Hawkwood Foundation that always says that to men, when he's speaking to men, every time that you click on a video or a pornographic image of a woman, you are driving the demand for your own wife and daughter and granddaughter. So pornography is a huge driver, and I just wanted to point that out as we move into a Q&A. So any questions? I know we maybe some online. Glenna, of course you have a question.
I have several, but.
Let's start with one.
The
Question
first
in part.
was, do those that are arrested claim entrapment, and what do we have a place in Texas that keeps that happening? Because you're obviously setting up a sting.
Well, it's not entrapment. I mean, us just simply putting out, and I'll put it in a sense of like a bait card, when you're trying to target auto theft, just by placing it there is not entrapment as well. It's them actually reaching out, because we're not reaching out to them, right? They're reaching out to us to engage in that conversation. So that doesn't fall under the entrapment clause as far as, a dismissal on that case itself. So there is no entrapment when it comes to these type of operations.
It doesn't keep it from saying that.
Well, true, yeah. Or it's like, I knew this wasn't real. It's like, it's like.
And then the other two I have are, do all these go to trial convention jurors as a state jail felony, or are most plead out and sent to the program? And are all of our courts in Tarrant County supportive of the program?
Well, a lot of them get pled out. That's the way a lot of criminal cases are handled. And so as far as being supportive of the program, as far as the rehabilitation piece, Judge Wynn has done a very good job on educating judges of the program that is available and make sure that it's a condition of that probation. And on that, I think Kevin has part of these sting operations also that I'm seeing a trend is they're also then in the course of the communication representing themselves to be under the age of 18. And I just got a lot of cases that were filed with our office where men, knowing that the victim in their minds are 15 years old, are still wanting to meet with them to have sex. That's not a state jail felony. But that kind of has now become a focus at a lot of those sting operations.
And clarification on that, nothing that the net does civilian wise is for any online solicitation of a minor or anything like that. It's all adult prostitution. So if they're reaching out for online solicitation of a minor, they're definitely not coming to my program.
Hold your next question.
So I'm curious, is the net reporting numbers of buyers that have sexual assault background, like net also in your child sexual assault on a stage net? I know that pornography and other vices and things play a part in it, but I do know personally some men that have in times past environment due to sexual trauma of their own. We tend to overlook that when it comes to men. So is that a part of the conversation that you're seeing that at all?
So that's a great point. Question was just about the buyer side. Are we recording numbers of them who have experienced some sort of sexual abuse themselves? We do know that for men who have compulsive sexual behavior, abuse and neglect are a large percentage of their stories. We don't yet, and that is more because we again, the ability for a volunteer to engage in that story requires them kind of opting into that. And so on one-off basis, when we do have guys who are interested in volunteer support, we'll get into those things. But in terms of just for the online course, no. That's a great point.
Yes, ma'am.
So the process, where does a minor actually also do the same thing as an adult will do? How are they actually identified? There are minors soliciting minors and or using minors, and they're minors themselves by law. How do you identify them to be, how are they arrested? I mean, they're still arrested, but how are they qualified? And will they be transferred over to an adult? Or will they stay in a minor situation, even though they're doing the same thing as an adult?
They would stay in the minor situation, but the youngest that we've seen is 17 and are considered an adult in the state of Texas at 17. That's the youngest we've seen as far as them engaging in these type of operations. We have not seen a 15 or a 16-year-old, come on and basically try to solicit sex from any of our undercover operations. So we've not seen that, but doesn't mean it doesn't exist. We know it does. And those would normally stay in the juvenile area as far as any criminal cases they may pick up as a juvenile. So those would all stay within the juvenile realm as far as the courts and things of that nature.
Yes, ma'am.
I guess that's like that being broken inside. It's guys broken. I know, like how addictive pornography is. You also focus on the spiritual side of things. I mean, that's the root of the trafficking people for. You guys that anything that's the spiritual side, the addiction side, obviously.
Yeah.
Repeat that.
So question was about dealing with the kind of the spiritual darkness that is involved in pornography addiction, besides just dealing with the addiction itself. And through just the program side of things, we try to provide resources for like a broad spectrum of buyers, whether faith is part of their story or not. For me and all of my volunteers, that is our motivation. And so if we're able to have that conversation with the volunteer, many of whom they are part of some sort of faith system already. And so I think in one sense, being able to bring that up, you're talking on common ground. And so we do try to get them connected to faith-based recovery groups, or if they're willing to have conversation with a volunteer, they're on that shared ground. So the answer is yes, but more in terms of the volunteer kind of opt in than specifically in the program.
You guys have like faith-based programs with pornography?
No, we don't. Not like facilitated by us. Yeah. Well, I would love for you to send me an email with some of those things.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Interesting question. Not that you use in the church. Is there anything that some awareness? Again, I'm 15-year-old already. So is there anything that you can have regulars that they don't that what a pitfall?
Yeah, I think that through the church specifically, if churches aren't addressing the issue of pornography, falling short from a moral standpoint of how dark it is, how pervasive it is, and the extremes that it can lead to. And so I would say finding the net does some trainings on that, but finding someone to come in and talk to the men in your church about that, or having people who are already inside the church talk about that. We do partner with some churches that have ministries specifically for that. So if that's something your church is interested in, something your church already has and wants to be a resource for the buyers, that's another really great way to engage as well.
And we'll have some resources at the end for the church that I've produced as well, and we'll share that link with you just to piggyback on that. Yes, ma'am. And
I'm not speaking out of term, but a couple of people have asked about resources for integrity and shares of that there is a program called Everything Battle, and there is a book that every month is battle also for that really addresses things that we were and maybe we can text it and have them.
Thank you. So every man's battle is the name. Okay, I've heard of it. Yes. Any other questions? Way back in the back.
But what is the maximum sentence for the felony when you're arrested? And then what is the typical or average? And then, the other part of that is when you offer them resources like this, what would be the sentence? Like, are they plea bargaining out of that? You know, like, if this is, they're doing this in lieu of that, and what does that look like?
Right.
That's
Well,
a big
first,
question, sorry.
no, that's okay. For state jail felony, it would be 2 years in the state jail if they were being sent to the pen. But the vast majority of these cases, they are given probation. And again, with Judge Wynn's help, with the condition of that probation, that they're going through a rehabilitation program such as TIES to try to address those underlying issues.
So our program is not in lieu, it's not like a deferred adjudication or anything. It's just a condition of probation if they're sent to us.
How long is that?
Can be up to 5 years, but I think usually I don't handle all those cases. But it's usually, you know, maybe a 2-year probation, but it can be up to 5 years.
Have you seen that if, having the, crime be a felony, have you seen any decrease? Has it helped?
As of yet, no. I don't think we can honestly say that we've seen any decrease. But again, as Ty mentioned, like most don't even understand it's a felony. Most think it's a citation. Most think that they're going to be issued a citation and walk out. And when they realize again, when it is a felony, I think that's when it's really the hard conversations that internally start happening with these individuals. But I still think we're working to raise the awareness within the communities that one, operations like this are run on a regular basis. So if you are the one that is picking up and trying to purchase sex, you don't know if it's going to be us or someone else that's on the other end. So, I mean, that is one of the big, hopefully, deterrents that we try to push. But it's also, like we talked about, is some of these programs that are trying to prevent somebody from becoming a buyer, right? I mean, that's one of the huge pieces too. And there are programs that are going in and talking to young men about, hey, what our healthy relationships look like, you know? And I think one of the individuals we had talked to that is actually running some of these programs talked, the first thing he said, like, how many of y'all have any nude photos on your phone that maybe a young woman sent you? And they'll sit there and they'll watch all these young men start looking at their phones and like deleting stuff. And it's like, it's like, okay, but that's kind of the society that we are dealing with right now. The over sexualization of society has really fueled a lot of this. And but the programs that are going in and talking to young men about what healthy relationships are and how pornography use that is a huge part of this. Because if we can prevent them from being a buyer, that's a huge win for us as well. And I know, talking from survivors, you know, some of the worst exploitation, some abuse they've had has come at the hand of a buyer. Physical assaults, you know, unfortunately, some have even killed, you know, individuals, and we've seen that in the news. So that is that's one of a big motivator for us as well. Like, is that individual that we're dealing with on these operations, is that one of these individuals that have actually assaulted that individual in the past? You know, or they have ulterior motives other than buying commercial, you know, or buying sex at this particular point. You know, we've had them show up with butcher knives and ropes and things of that nature in their possession, you know, handguns. It's like these individuals are subject to being robbed at any time, and you know, that is not a deterrent for them. You know, they are still willing to go to any hotel and meet with anybody that they've never met before. We have one individual that was recently arrested that was recording the interaction at the door because he said he had been, you know, robbed in the past. Like, I mean, why are you here then? Right? Like, that makes no sense, right? So it's like, but I think there are a lot of great programs. You know, the MAIDS program is an amazing thing that we've actually been able to, you know, actually see some of these individuals that we've encountered, you know, embrace and start talking to some of the counselors or ties group that are there. And I mean, I think those conversations are very, you know, honest conversations, and we don't see those individuals again. So it's like, but that doesn't mean they stop. We just
Yeah, I don't think we've seen a marked decrease in demand yet, but we finally have the tools to address it, if that makes sense. That's, I think, the biggest piece about having a felony on PSA jump.
And I think real quick, the survivors have played a huge role in informing this whole process. And because part of Five Stones, we have survivors that are involved here, survivor leaders, so that law enforcement, nonprofits, the DA's office, and can have access to the information to be able to understand the issue in order from the survivor's perspective. So I think that's important. I saw a hand go. Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner, just to get a clear picture of the operation, so are their cars impounded on that? And then are they put in the jail that night? And then I'm wondering how soon would it land on that?
Cars are not impounded. We were hoping to start seizing vehicles, based off of these, but there are some things within the seizure laws that prohibit us from actually seeing on state jail felonies. However, those individuals that show up believing they're meeting with a minor, that's a different situation where we actually seize those vehicles in that particular point, which is a huge impact on some of these individuals if we actually seize their vehicle. They are arrested that day. They are put into the Tarrant County Jail. They are processed until they can see a magistrate to either post bond or sit there until we file the cases with the Lindy's office or the DA's office. And usually that's within 48 hours that we're getting these cases filed. Sometimes there's maybe a little bit longer delay than that, but once the cases are filed, then that's of course when they're assigned to a particular court, and then the prosecutor is assigned to a case. And then I know Lindy has been very much involved in wanting to know some of these cases come through, especially if it's believed to be a minor that they were engaging with, so she can handle those cases first.
Thank you. We've got just a few minutes left. And I wanted to, let's move to, I know there's going to be more questions, but we'll have to pause on those and you guys will be around afterwards for a few minutes. That's okay. Can I impose on your time and more of your time? But I wanted to talk about next steps because it's wonderful to understand and define reality, what the problem is, but okay, what can we do? There's a lot of agencies here, but we have a lot of concerned citizens, people from churches that are like, okay, well, what can I do? So I think we wanted to, do I need to advance a slide here? Yeah. The first thing I want to talk about, I know Lindy is the expert in this area, but I've been through the Citizen Prosecution Academy before. I wasn't prosecuted. I wasn't in trouble. So I wasn't in trouble. I volunteered to go through it, and it was very interesting. They covered human trafficking. They covered all aspects of prosecution. It is a 12-week class, and it's free, and it's a great opportunity for a citizen, if your pastor, someone that's interested on what does it look like for a prosecution to proceed on any number of crimes. But they do, what I was glad for was that we spent almost 2 hours on human trafficking, and I was on the Five Stones as like a little spy. I was like, are they going to talk about you? And they did, and this was great. So that's one opportunity. The next one is Ty. You want to touch on the net and mace?
Yeah, so we need men to engage in this work. And so we have a couple of volunteer opportunities for the direct fire engagement. We also have opportunities to provide direct services to survivors in safe situations through the net. That helps. Honestly, it helps a lot of the women that we serve realize that there are men out there who don't want to exploit them, who can be safe, healthy relationships. And so if any of those things sound great to you, or if you're a woman who would like to provide any of the services that we provide to survivors, our next volunteer orientation is next Monday, May 6th from 12 to 1 on Zoom. You can go to the net.w.com/volunteer training and sign up for that.
Awesome.
It's $20 to register for the orientation.
Finally, there's someone asked about church engagement. December, with the expertise I've learned from these folks and others in Five Stones of the last 8, almost 9 years, I wrote a volume 1 of how the church can end human trafficking. It's a field manual, and it's free. You can just go to the QR code, download it, print it, but it does give you some just initial steps to help a church just engage. And it covers everything from pornography to the pulpit to the pews. How do you get your head around theologically, but also practically to fight human trafficking. I hope that's helpful. I think that is it. If you have any questions, since Felicia's not here, we just volunteer her a lot of stuff since she's not here. So any questions that you have that we weren't able to answer today, if you have questions about Five Stones, please email Felicia. I'll turn it over to Ms. Sonia. Oh, please thank our panel.
Thank you guys so much for the amazing information that you gave us. And it's just so incredible to see the impact that, again, we're seeing in our community when it comes to addressing human trafficking and looking at the different areas in which human trafficking affects people. So guys, thank you so much. Just remember, our Five Stone meetings are held every last Tuesday of the month. For those of you who have not registered, please make sure that you stop by and register. If you're new to Five Stones, we want to thank those who attended virtually as well as for you guys who attended live. And thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.